Asia, the new center of the world game. 1 in 2 football fans globally live on this continent. Here, homegrown legends rise and champions are crowned. Proud nations fly their colors and tribes of fans in booming cities unleash their energy. Intense, diverse. Here, local is king. It's a new era of Asian football, a new type of fandom, a new chapter to an historic story.
Hello. Good afternoon if you're in Asia, good morning if you're in Europe, good night if you're in the States. Welcome to the Sports Matters Academy. My name is Jasper Donat, the CEO of Branded. We produce all these wonderful matters things like the Sports Matters Academy. The Sports Matters Academy is a series of virtual events designed to help build a foundation for anyone interested in learning more about the sports business. Throughout the series, we are covering all sorts of topics such as sports rights, marketing, working with brands, live events, player management, sports law, the metaverse, and more through the series. The content is virtual, it's live, and it's fireside. And today, we're talking data. And I will say that this session is absolutely dedicated to anyone that worked in a research company in the research department of any broadcaster anywhere in the world who got flack from the sales teams if their ratings dropped. It was always the research department's fault, not the programmer's fault. But today's session is live. It's virtual. We want to hear from you. Please get your questions in if you have anything about research and for our speaker today. In a minute, we'll introduce you to Mike Wragg from Nielsen. But before that, as you will have noticed, the Sports Matters Academy is 100% free to attend, and that is 100% thanks to our sponsors and partners that include Nielsen, Football Marketing Asia, Sports Singapore, and Sport Business. Plus, we have support from Mailman, Asia Sports Tech, and Pictureboard. So thank you to all of those for making this possible. Finally, thank you for joining. Please enjoy, please learn. And as I said, please do get your questions in so we can make this as interactive as possible. On with the show. Once the most nerdy topic of all, data is the new oil, where sports analytics can provide competitive advantage to clubs, players, leagues, and events. So as I said before, we are joined by Nielsen's Mike Wragg. He is the Managing Director of Nielsen Asia Pacific and the Global Head of Strategy, Consulting and Research. Mike, welcome to the Sports Matters Academy. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do for a living with Nielsen, and interestingly, where are you in the world today, Mike?
Thanks, Jasper. So I'm coming to you from Cyprus today. Cyprus is an important node for our business in the Middle East and has been for many years. And so I'm kind of quite often over here. My job at Nielsen, really, I've got 2 jobs. The first one is that I head up our consulting and research division across all of the international markets. And the second one is that I'm the managing director of our business in Asia Pacific. So basically, I'm traveling today. I'm in Cyprus.
Fantastic. Well, have a Retsina for me, but also it does also mean if we do start losing a little bit of connectivity, then people will understand, which also by fate means that mine will completely cut out. So on the subject itself, we said data is the new oil, but for people who don't know, why do I want data and what data do I want?
Yeah. So maybe we can switch over to the first slides. By the way, folks, we don't have too many slides today deliberately, but let's take that first question. So first of all, why do we need any data at all? And the answer to that is fairly simple, because what we're dealing with is investments. So investments in sponsorship, investments in media rights. And as with all investments, if you have a more precise understanding as to what you're getting in return for your investment, then that investment is worth more for you. So a lot of there's been a lot of changes in the amount of data that is available in the sports industry over the last 20 or 30 years. And often you'll come across people, particularly in larger rights holder organizations, who will reminisce about the days when basically, as long as you could charm the chairman of your sponsor and give him, really, really good tickets for his friends, then that was pretty much all you needed to do the deal. That has really changed now. So now the amounts that are being invested in sport are much greater. And actually, the data associated with it is a very good thing, because it makes it a less risky and therefore more valuable investment. So in the end, both the rights holders who are selling and the advertisers and media platforms that are buying are actually spending and earning more money as a result of the fact that the data is there to understand it properly. And second part of your kind of question is, well, what is the data in sport? What kind of data is a really important data for these investments? And these up on the screen here, these are what I call the big five in the data necessary for the commercialization of sport. So the first one is all about understanding the audience. So exactly who are they? How many are there of them? And also how much exposure of the sponsor's logo is happening within the many, many, many different ways that people are following and watching sport. So the audience, the exposure, and the quality of the exposure that's happening. And a lot of neuroscience has been done over the years in understanding, if the logo is exposed in the center of the screen or in the corner of the screen, what if it's on for just a few seconds or it's there for quite some time? What if it is there right behind when a goal is scored? At the moment where everybody is concentrating most, does that have a bigger impact than other things? And so a lot of work has been done to understand that and to be able to put it together. So that's the first one, the kind of audience and exposure piece. Second part is all about the fans and really getting into a lot of detail of understanding their lives, because when you think about it, it's obvious, but different people have really different reasons why they're interested in engaging with sport in the first place. And those different reasons are the key to getting them engaged and therefore having some impact with what we're doing in terms of the media, the engagement, and ultimately the rewards that sponsors get for funding a lot of sport. So that work is generally survey work which is done, but increasingly a lot of behavioral information about fans and really understanding how they're consuming sport and why they care about sport. Third one, customers. And obviously fans are sometimes, and we hope often, customers for the brands which are using sport as an advertising medium. But when the brands, when the advertisers are thinking about their customers, they will have different ways of understanding their behavior in relation to the things that those brands are selling as well. And so they will have their own segmentation models. They will have other ways of targeting and increasing the engagement they have with their customers. And increasingly, their job is about building a community around those customers as well. And so there's a huge amount of data that is built in understanding people as customers. The two final ones are quite different types of data. So the fourth one is content data, or often what we call metadata. So this will be the data which is actually about the sport. So when you are listening to the commentary of your favorite sport and the commentator appears to be impossibly well informed about how many times these two teams have met before, what the results have been, what the likely outcome is going to be in this particular case? What about the biographies of the most famous players, et cetera, et cetera? All of that data also has to be built, and Nielsen and Nielsen's Grace Note team build a huge amount of that data that you'll see, which is integrated into the sport content as well. So that's another very important element. And then finally, market intelligence. So if you're an advertiser and you're trying to understand what's the best way to spend your money, part of it is going to be about, well, how do I get exposure to the right people? But you're also going to be really interested to understand what everybody else is investing in, because you want to try and have the least cluttered environment that you can. So another kind of major data source that we build at Nielsen is a huge database of all of the sponsorship deals, for example, that happen around the world, which then allow us to build these kind of optimization models for advertisers. So those are the big five. Probably the most intense area is around the audience data and that exposure analysis, but all of these other areas are absolutely key as well. And as a result of this, it's a big global industry in creating and analyzing this data.
Fantastic. So Mike, talk about what data I need and what's out there, but who needs it?
Yeah, so maybe flick on to the next slide for this one, and really there are traditionally there are two main groups of people that are that need the data and that are using the data very intensively day to day. The first one is advertisers that we've already spoken about. So particularly in relation to sponsorship, they are the people that are making the investment, and again in relation to media rights as well, they're the ones which are looking to place advertising around core content in entertainment. So they need a huge amount of information in order to make the best possible choices for those investments. But increasingly, the content owners, and when I'm talking about the content owner, that could be the football club, or more likely the football league, if we're taking a football example. They're the people that have to sell to both to media platforms and also to advertisers. So if they want to go to that negotiation with a confidence about how much what they're selling is worth, and the ability to really put together a strong negotiation on that, then they also need that information. They need to be able to work out how valuable they are to the advertisers and to the media platforms. And so that's a main reason that they need that data as well. But also when they've struck the deal, very often these days, part of the deal will be that there will be certain performance indicators that will be measured throughout the deal. So those content owners are very often buying the data as well in order to be able to create a story for people that have already invested in them, their sponsors, about how much value is being delivered, because they're already thinking about, well, when this deal comes up to be renewed again in however many years' time, we're going to need a really good story about how much value we've delivered in this relationship. And so they have to build the data on a continuous basis. And at the most extreme kind of examples, we have some of our clients on both sides now who actually are starting to build in a kind of pay per performance element in what they're doing as well, in which case they then need that audience data, they need that fan data to be able to actually prove out contractually how much they should be paying going through. I'd say there's still a kind of small group relative to all of the sponsors around the world, but it's started, and once that's started, I would imagine that's going to grow. And then finally, media platforms. So media platforms need to understand what people are interested in. They need to understand which content they should buy in order to increase their audiences and increase their value to advertisers and other kind of key stakeholders. So they need that data too. And one of the things which is, as technology evolves and as the marketplace evolves, that is becoming more and more true, is that the distinction between advertisers, content owners, and media platforms is getting real blurry now. So many content owners. So if we think about, Jasper, you're sitting in Singapore today, one of the largest content owners based in Singapore is One Championship. One Championship, I would argue that One Championship is really a media company. They're creating a lot of their own content. They're distributing a lot of their own content. We also work with them in looking at the effectiveness of their own brand and their own advertising as well. So in a sense, they're also an advertiser. So these distinctions between the different groups in the industry are really breaking down.
So that's sort of what data I need and who else uses data. And by the way, anyone has any questions, please do get them in. Questions for Mike about research and data, we can get them to him. But okay, so how do you source all this data? These wonderful numbers, where do they come from?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a few different places, and that's really changing as well, very, very fast at the moment, which is very exciting. So a lot of the audience data, particularly for TV audience data, still comes from large panels which we run around the world, people that give us permission to understand exactly what they're watching and for how long and who's in their household and all of that kind of good information that we put together. But of course, I mean, it's very interesting. We were just looking at the overall statistics globally this year for a project that we're doing at the moment. And if we look at sport overall, 43% now of TV, of the sports audience is TV, 39% of the audience is streaming. We're nearly getting to the point now where streaming is actually overtaking globally as the kind of means by which people connect with sport around the world. And with streaming data, you've got different sorts of information, because there will be information that the streaming platform will have about the subscribers to that platform, which can also be a really useful source of direct behavioral information as to what's happening there. And that's much easier to capture, and therefore there's a lot more data which becomes available. The other kind of key areas that are changing is exposure. So understanding how much logo exposure, for example, occurs in different video feeds. Well, we have a huge facility in Bangalore in India, whereby we record all sport footage everywhere around the world, on TV, on social media, right down to video clips from kind of news items as well. And we have an AI-led process that goes through all of that frame by frame, identifies all of the logos and the quality of exposure where it was, and feeds that through into our system in order to be able to kind of create that data. And then the final part, survey, is still important. So, kind of traditional surveys, we do Nielsen alone, we do many millions of fan interviews a year in order to pick up the data that we need. And we also do a colossal amount of social listening across a larger and larger number of social platforms. And the type of information that we're collecting that way is also starting to change, because things which were perhaps less important 10 years ago, like, for example, understanding how passionate fans or customers are about various different social causes, that wasn't particularly important from an overall investment point of view 10 years ago. Now it's really, really crucial, because a lot of the way that that sponsors are going to be activating, and indeed fan engagement is going to be happening from a lot of the major content owners as well, needs to be very, very aware Fans, customers expect these major organizations now to be taking a stand on a number of different social issues. So there's a whole range of new data that needs to be captured and brought into the system because that has become a very important part of value overall.
So you mentioned things like AI and stuff, and we've had a lot of conversations about things like the metaverse and what have you. But how is data changing? How's the industry changing? Like, no longer is, you say that you've still got the surveys, but there's so much more going on. What is the future looking like?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and it's not a linear path as well into the future on this one. We're actually seeing some very interesting effects. But the big headlines, of course, it's digitization. I've already talked about it. The fact that so much is streamed now, and there is much more information about who is watching that, and much more detailed behavioral information. That is really, really key. AI, machine learning, other techniques allow us to process and analyze that huge additional information which is coming in much better as well. So if you look at the kind of people that are working at Nielsen, many more data scientists than you would have found 10 years ago, many more engineers and data scientists. But there's another kind of aspect to that as well, because as we become more concerned about our privacy and understanding, and people are starting to understand that they should have the right to be able to control how their information is used. Of course, that has a very big and really important impact on how we collect data and what kind of data and what the extent to which people need to permission a lot of data, which is easy to collect, but now needs to be permissioned. That changes a lot of things. And one of the effects of that is that actually there is now a really important role again for kind of more traditional online survey data, often not as the way that we're gathering the continuous information, but rather as the way that we're being able to take the continuous information and then being able to predict some of the other details about that continuous information, which, because of previous restrictions that we have now, we're not able to gather directly in that data feed. So very often we're doing more foundational survey research that allows us to build models to predict who we're observing in those other continuous behavioral data feeds. And then the final thing that's changed a lot is the kind of balance of how people get data as well. So part of this is, it's much easier to self-serve on data. So a lot of our clients now work with dashboards rather than kind of old sort of PowerPoint reports or kind of like books of data, which people sort of find much harder to use. So there are many more platforms, but at the same time, as I said at the beginning, a lot of this data is being used to make very specific decisions, which don't happen every day. So, renewing the rights for the next 3 years, this is is a conversation that happens once every 3 years. A lot of data has to be collated into that, but there's as well as the continuous feeds, there's also the need to be able to build data around a very specific investment. And that operates at a kind of strategic level and also a tactical level. So there will be teams that are leveraging the data on a day-to-day basis, trying to optimize the amount of engagement from fans, trying to optimize the monetization of that engagement. And then there will be other groups of people, often in the same company, who are using the data in a totally different way, in a much more strategic way, in understanding what's happening across the world, across the next 10 years, predicting how much things will be, how the value of things will be different in 10 years' time compared to now. So a lot of change, and it's very, very interesting.
Fantastic. So into the final section, and we can probably take the presentation down This being the Sports Matters Academy, it's all about careers and how we can help people get on in their jobs and learn and what have you. Careers in research. Who works in research? I mean, you're talking about data science. Is it lots of people with goatee beards or is that just a cliche? What kind of people are you looking for? And how do I get a job at Nielsen?
Well, I mean, I think if we look at the kind of people that we have, there are probably a few stereotypes that we need to bust straight away on that. So the most important thing is that we're a research organization. So we need a very, very strong, balanced representation of all of the people that we are researching within the team. And as a result of that, a very, very high priority for Nielsen and also for some of our competitors as well is diversity and inclusion. And one of the challenges that I have is that the department that I run has got sport in the title, and sometimes that can be a little bit off-putting for women in some cultures who feel that sport is still a male preserve. But actually, in a lot of the key functions in my business, the majority of people are women. So that's kind of one myth that we should bust straight away. And also that there needs to be a really good representation of different ages as well. That's really, really key. Because again, if we think about the type of things which sports fans find engaging for fans in their teens and in their 20s compared to people closer to my age, there are some very, very big differences there, and we need to reflect that. But in terms of the kind of skill sets that we need, there are really kind of three key areas in the business. The first one is the kind of more data science-led aspect of that. So the whole thing has become more mathematical, and we definitely, I mean, I think, if you don't have a kind of a strong numeracy background, then, you'd probably be kind of quite miserable working in a business like ours. But, so we do have some people that are sort of data science focused with a sort of strong mathematical or scientific background. But equally, we have a fairly large population of people who really are much more focused on seeing how people make decisions. So this would be much closer to the profile for management consultants, and in fact, a lot of people that we employ from kind of McKinsey, Pricewaterhouse, other kind of major management consultancy houses, and that becomes really important because in the end, what we're doing is advising people on how to make investments. And so you need people that really can really deeply understand the sports business and the kind of investments that are going to be made between that. So that's really the kind of the balance that we have to strike between the very mathematical people and then the people that are much, much more focused on the industry and understanding the kind of problems that they're trying to solve.
Mike, this has been a brilliant half hour with you, and it's brilliant that for working with a research person, when I said how long is this going to go for, we said about half an hour. You've nailed it, bang on half an hour. So fantastic. Thank you so much. Look, it's a fascinating chat. We've talked about a lot of the research, the reason why data is so important. A lot of money is being invested in sports. So everyone needs the data for audience measurement. The sponsors and the media owners need it to justify what they're spending or charging. Understanding fans and engagement. It's not just about the viewership anymore. It's about how people are engaging. We talked about how lines are blurring between the content owners, the media platforms, and the advertisers. We talked about change being a constant. It's a very diverse industry. As you finished on there, know your numbers. Now, you didn't tell me about how I get a job at Nielsen, but I did get an O-level, my C in maths O-level, GCSE. Okay. But look, clearly,
that's a start.
There you go. Yeah. I'm in. Just need to come. I'll see you in Cyprus. But data matters. Nielsen matters. Mike, thank you so much for joining us from Cyprus today. Up next, for the Sports Matters Academy, we will be looking at the live sports and gaming industry together. So events are coming back. You saw the Super Bowl in the US, you see Premier League in the UK. In Asia Pacific, a lot of events are starting to happen again. The World Table Tennis just happened in Singapore. So we're going to be talking to producers and venues and security and directors and all about the live sports and gaming industry and how to get on in that. So please join us. I think that's on the 7th of April. But again, thank you today to all of our sponsors, but especially thank you to Mike Wragg and the team at Nielsen for putting an excellent presentation together. Thank you.